The galaxy was a vast and bustling place. Stars burned brightly, and countless planets thrived with life. But not all worlds were equal. Among the many civilizations spread across the stars, there was one that had been forgotten. A race of beings known as the Velith, once mighty and proud, had been cast aside by the rest of the galaxy. Earth, far from this distant corner of the universe, knew nothing about the Velith. They were not part of Earth's explorations or even the galactic news. But this forgotten race, now left to struggle on a desolate planet, was about to find an unexpected ally. It began with a signal. It was faint, barely detectable, a mere whisper across the vast reaches of space. Earth's scientists had just begun using their new communication equipment, eager to explore the unknown corners of the universe. They hadn't expected to find anything. But this signal, it was different. Dr. Karen Mendez, a young scientist at the Earth Defense Agency, was the first to notice it. The signal was not like anything Earth had received before. It wasn't a natural occurrence or an automated beacon. It was something alive. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate. The signal came from a distant planet on the edge of the galaxy, where no major civilization existed. When Dr. Mendez analyzed the message, she was stunned. The signal was coming from a race called the Velith, a species once thought to be lost forever. But the message was desperate, almost broken. The Velith were in danger. Karen's heart raced as she read the message again. It wasn't just a distress call. It was a cry for help. The Velith had been abandoned by the galaxy, their once great civilization, shattered after a series of brutal attacks from a ruthless galactic empire. Now, they were fighting for survival, alone on a planet with nothing left but ruins and the memories of a past glory. The message told of their fall from power, of how their homeworld was once a shining beacon of knowledge and culture, now reduced to a wasteland. It spoke of betrayal and loss, and it begged for assistance. At first, Karen couldn't believe it. The Velith were known for their advanced technology and military might. How could they be in such a desperate state? But as she continued to study the message, a sense of urgency built up inside her. The Velith needed help, and Earth might be the only one who could provide it. She quickly gathered a team to investigate. They were uncertain about the decision. Some thought it was too dangerous to risk Earth's resources on a race that might no longer even exist. Others were skeptical about getting involved in galactic politics. But Karen knew one thing for sure. If Earth could help, they had to. It was the right thing to do. The team's mission was clear. They would travel to the Velith's homeworld, assess the situation, and determine if there was any way to save them. But little did they know, this journey would be the beginning of a new chapter for Earth and the Velith. A chapter filled with danger, courage, and a surprising alliance that would change the course of history. Dr. Karen Mendez couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening. She had read the signal from the Velith multiple times, each time with growing urgency. It wasn't just a cry for help. It was a plea for survival. Earth's leaders needed to know about this. She hurried to the Earth Defense Agency's headquarters, where high-ranking officials were already gathering for an emergency meeting. The building was filled with tension. The military, political leaders, and scientists all waited for her to speak. Karen stood before them, her hand shaking slightly as she presented her findings. "The Velith are not just some forgotten race," she said, her voice steady. "They are survivors of a brutal galactic war. They've been abandoned by everyone, left to fight alone." The room grew quiet as the reality of her words settled in. General Marcus Hill, a military leader with decades of experience, was the first to speak. "What do you mean, abandoned? The Velith were once one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Why weren't they helped?" Karen took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. The Velith were part of a galactic coalition, but the Tsor Empire, the one that's been growing in power for decades, decided they were too dangerous. They betrayed the Velith, stripped them of their technology, and left them to die on a planet that's now nothing but ruins. Another official, Ambassador Laura Yang, leaned forward. "And you think Earth should get involved? We don't even know what we're dealing with. The Tsora are ruthless. Do we really want to go up against them?" Karen nodded. "I understand the risk, but I also believe it's our responsibility. If we stand by and do nothing, we will be no better than those who abandoned them in the first place." A long silence followed as the room processed her words. Some of the officials were unsure, questioning whether Earth's resources should be spent on a cause so far away. Others, however, began to see the bigger picture. If the Veleth were truly alone and desperate, helping them might open new doors for Earth. Finally, General Hill stood up, his decision clear. "I agree with Dr. Mendez. Earth may not have the military power of the Tsora, but we have something stronger: our determination. If there's a chance we can help, we will." Karen felt a rush of relief. She had known there would be resistance, but this was the support she needed. The decision was made. Earth would send a ship to the Veleth's homeworld to make first contact and assess the situation. The mission was risky, and everyone knew it. There were many unknowns. What kind of danger awaited them on that broken planet? Would the Veleth even trust them? The questions piled up, but the decision had been made. Earth had to act. Days later, a specially trained crew was assembled. The ship, the Horizon, was equipped with the best technology Earth had to offer. Dr. Mendez was selected to lead the team, and she felt both excited and anxious. They were about to journey to the unknown. As the Horizon lifted off from Earth's surface, Karen looked out the window at the planet below. This mission wasn't just about saving a forgotten race. It was about proving to the galaxy that Earth had the courage to stand up for what was right. The journey would be long. There would be dangers ahead, but Karen was ready. She knew that Earth's future could be shaped by this one decision, and she wasn't going to back down. The journey to the Veleth homeworld took longer than expected. As the Horizon cruised through the vast emptiness of space, Dr. Karen Mendez stared out the ship's observation window. Her mind was filled with questions. What would they find on the planet? Would the Veleth be willing to trust humans, or would they see Earth as another threat? The unknown stretched out before her, just like the stars beyond. The crew on board was a mix of scientists, engineers, and military personnel. Everyone had a different role, but all of them were equally aware of the importance of this mission. Their task was clear: make contact, assess the situation, and, if possible, help the Veleth rebuild. But the uncertainty weighed on them. As the Horizon approached the planet, the sensors began picking up strange readings. The planet's surface looked scared, covered in deep craters and large swaths of destroyed cities. It was clear that the Veleth had not been living in peace for a long time. The once proud planet had been ravaged by war, and now it was a shadow of its former self. Karen stood up, her heart pounding as the ship entered the atmosphere. She was nervous, but also determined. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "Prepare for landing," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. The crew scrambled to their stations, checking equipment and ensuring that everything was in place. Soon, the ship descended toward the surface. The landing was rough, with the ship bouncing slightly as it touched down. Karen could feel the impact in her bones, but she didn't let it shake her resolve. They were here. They had made it. The crew quickly disembarked, their boots hitting the cracked, dusty ground. The air smelled of burnt metal and old decay. The once beautiful forests and oceans were gone, replaced by barren landscapes and wreckage. "It's worse than we thought," said Captain Harris, one of the military officers accompanying the team. His voice was low, but there was no mistaking the shock in his tone. They had all expected devastation, but seeing it firsthand was different. Karen nodded, but she didn't let her emotions show. She had a job to do. The Veleth were out there, somewhere, and it was up to her to find them. They moved cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of life. It wasn't long before they came across their first clue. In the distance, hidden among the ruins of what had once been a grand city, they spotted movement. Figures, barely visible, darted between the broken buildings. Are those Vilith? One of the scientists asked. Karen nodded. They must be. Stay alert. They approached carefully, weapons at the ready. As they got closer, they saw more Vilith, some hiding in the shadows, others watching from behind rubble. The Vilith looked different from what Earth had imagined. Their skin was a dark, almost metallic shade, and their eyes glowed with a faint, eerie light. They were tall, their bodies slender and graceful, but their faces showed signs of weariness and distrust. Then one figure stepped forward. She was taller than the others, with sharp, striking features. Her eyes locked onto Karen's, filled with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. This was Naira, the leader of the Vilith. You come to our world, Naira said, her voice cold but steady. Why? Karen swallowed, taking a deep breath. We came because we heard your call for help. Earth is here to assist you. Naira studied Karen for a long moment, her gaze piercing. It felt as though the alien woman could see right through her, reading her every thought. Finally, Naira spoke again, her tone softer but no less guarded. You come from Earth? She asked, disbelief in her voice. After everything, after all these years, you still care? Karen nodded. We care, and we're here to help you rebuild. The two women stood facing each other, separated by nothing but distrust and the wreckage of a broken world. But in that moment, something shifted. Naira didn't say anything more, but she stepped back, allowing Karen and her team to move forward. Karen knew that this was only the beginning. The Vilith were skeptical, but they had taken the first step toward cooperation. Earth's mission had just begun, and the path ahead would be anything but easy. The Vilith homeworld was not the beautiful planet it once had been. The once thriving cities lay in ruins, their advanced technology scattered and forgotten. As Karen and her team walked alongside Naira, the leader of the Vilith, they felt the weight of the history around them. Everything had been destroyed by the Torah, an empire known throughout the galaxy for its cruelty and relentless expansion. As the group traveled deeper into the remains of the city, Naira began to speak. Her voice was low and filled with pain, as though each word carried the weight of years of loss. The Torah came when we were at our peak, Naira explained. They saw us as a threat, as a people who might one day rival their power. So they destroyed us. Karen listened closely. She had studied the history of galactic empires, but she had never heard of the Torah before. It was clear they were not a typical empire. Why didn't the rest of the galaxy help you? Karen asked, her voice full of disbelief. Why didn't anyone step in? Naira's gaze turned distant, as though she were lost in painful memories. The galaxy abandoned us. We were too strong, too independent for their liking. The Torah promised the other races peace in exchange for our destruction. No one helped. We were left to fight alone. The truth hit Karen hard. The Vilith had been betrayed by their allies, left to fend for themselves in a battle they could not win. The thought of an entire race being erased, not by an act of war, but by cold betrayal, sent a chill through her. She glanced at the ruins around them, now feeling the full weight of the Vilith story. Where are they now? Karen asked quietly, still trying to comprehend what she had just heard. They are still out there, Naira answered, her voice steady but filled with anger. The Torah are a force unlike any the galaxy has ever seen. They control entire star systems, crushing anyone who stands in their way. Karen's thoughts raced. The Torah were not just an enemy. They were a threat to everyone. If the Vilith, one of the most powerful civilizations, could be wiped out, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have? We can't just leave you like this, Karen said, her voice firm. We'll help you fight back. Naira studied her for a long time before speaking. You think you can defeat the Torah? She asked, a hint of skepticism in her voice. We have to try, Karen replied without hesitation. If we don't, they'll come for others. We won't stand by and let that happen. The Vilith leader seemed to consider this for a moment. She didn't speak again for a while, but her expression softened ever so slightly. Karen could see that Naira wasn't used to trust, especially after being betrayed by the galaxy, but Earth had given her a spark of hope. As they continued their journey through the ruined city, Karen couldn't help but wonder how Earth could possibly stand against an empire like the Zora. But one thing was clear: if they didn't act, there would be no one left to protect. The path ahead was uncertain. The Zora were ruthless, their fleets immense. But Karen was determined. Earth had come to the Veleth's aid, and now there was no turning back. Together, they would face the Zora, no matter the cost. The sun was setting on the ruined city of the Veleth, casting long shadows across the broken streets. Karen Mendez and her team stood beside Naira, the Veleth leader, staring at the horizon where the Zora might one day appear. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. They had a shared purpose now. "We can't waste time," Karen said, breaking the silence. "We need to figure out how to fight back. The Zora won't wait forever." Naira nodded, her eyes still focused on the distance. "You underestimate them, human. The Zora have vast fleets, weapons of unimaginable power. We are nothing against them." Karen felt the weight of those words, but she refused to let them sink in. She had seen the Veleth's technology. Even though it was outdated and broken, it was still impressive. The problem wasn't their weapons. It was their will to fight. The Veleth had lost everything. They were tired, worn down by years of war and betrayal. But Earth had something they didn't: hope. "We don't need to fight like they do," Karen replied. "We need to use what we have: strategy, creativity, and the will to win. You may have lost your strength, Naira, but Earth hasn't." The Veleth leader turned to face her, her gaze intense. "You are brave, human, but bravery alone will not save us." Karen took a deep breath. "I know, but it's a start." Over the next few days, the humans and the Veleth worked together, their alliance growing stronger with each passing hour. The humans shared their advanced technology with the Veleth, while the Veleth provided their knowledge of the Zora and the ancient weapons they had once used. Karen was impressed by how quickly the Veleth adapted to the new technology, using it as if they had never stopped working with it. But it wasn't just the technology that mattered. Karen could see the change in Naira. She was no longer the broken, distrustful leader who had first met them. She was beginning to believe, just a little, that they could win. But there was still hesitation in her eyes, as though she was afraid to hope again. "Tell me more about the Zora," Karen asked one evening as they sat in the makeshift command center. "What are they really like? Why did they target you?" Naira looked at her for a moment, then spoke quietly. "The Zora are cruel, yes, but they are also smart. They do not destroy without reason. They saw us as a threat. We were a free people, too powerful to control. The galaxy did not understand what we could become. The Zora destroyed us because we refused to bow to them." Karen understood. The Veleth weren't like the other races in the galaxy. They didn't seek power for the sake of power. They wanted to grow, to learn, to live on their own terms. And that, to the Zora, was a danger. "So they wiped you out," Karen said softly. "And now they think they can do the same to Earth." Naira nodded grimly. "Yes, they will come for you too, human. They will never allow us to rebuild." Karen clenched her fists. "Then we'll stop them. Together." It wasn't much, but it was a promise. A promise that Earth would not just stand by while the galaxy's bullies destroyed another race. They had a chance to make a stand, and Karen wasn't going to let it slip away. The unlikely alliance between Earth and the Veleth was still in its early stages. There was much to learn, much to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Hope that together, they could fight the Zora and win. The atmosphere on the Veleth homeworld was tense. The combined Earth and Veleth forces had spent weeks preparing for the coming battle. The humans had helped rebuild some of the Veleth's lost technology, and the Veleth had shared their knowledge of the Zora. But despite all their preparation, there was one thing no one could predict: when the Tora would arrive. Karen Mendez stood on the balcony of the makeshift command center, looking out over the ruins of what had once been a thriving city. The wind was cold, and the air smelled of dust and smoke. It had been a long road to get here, but now, with the Tora approaching, Karen could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. This was the battle that would determine the future of the Veleth and possibly the future of Earth. "Commander, they're here," a voice called from behind her. Karen turned and saw one of the military officers standing in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. She knew what he meant, even before he spoke the words. "The Tzora fleet has entered the system," he said, his voice shaky. "They're coming." Karen's heart raced, but she didn't show it. She had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, everything seemed more real. The Tzora were not just a distant threat anymore. They were here. "Get everyone ready," Karen said, her voice calm but firm. "This is what we've trained for." The officers scrambled to their stations, sending out the final orders for the Veleth and Earth forces to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, Karen walked quickly toward the communications room, where Naira and her advisors were already waiting. The Veleth leader looked just as calm as Karen, but her eyes betrayed the fear she was trying to hide. "This is it," Naira said, her voice low. "The Tzora have come to finish what they started." Karen nodded. "But we're not going to let them. We got a plan, and we're going to fight back." Together, they studied the tactical maps on the screen. The Tzora fleet was large, far larger than anything Earth had ever faced. Their ships were massive, with weapons that could decimate entire cities in minutes. But Karen was determined. Earth had always been outnumbered, outgunned, but they had one thing that Tzora didn't: the will to fight for what was right. "We don't need to beat them in a head-to-head battle," Karen said, pointing to the screen. "We need to be smarter than them. We use the terrain, the old Veleth technology. We'll strike when they least expect it." Naira looked at her with a mixture of respect and skepticism. "You are brave, human. But can your people really hold against the might of the Tzora?" "We will," Karen replied. "Because if we don't, everything we've worked for will be destroyed." With the plan in place, the Earth and Veleth forces moved into position. The ships were ready, their weapons charged. Everyone knew the stakes were high. The Tzora weren't just fighting for control of a planet. They were fighting to crush any hope of resistance in the galaxy. Then, as the sky darkened and the stars above seemed to flicker with tension, the first Tzora ship appeared on the horizon. It was huge, a black mass of metal and death. Behind it, the rest of the fleet followed, their ships gliding through the stars like shadows, blocking out the light. The battle was about to begin. Karen stood tall on the command platform, her eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. The time for talk was over. Now they would see if Earth's courage could stand up to the brutal force of the Tzora. The future of the Veleth and the galaxy itself depended on this moment. The battle had begun. Karen stood at the command center, her eyes glued to the massive display showing the Tzora fleet advancing. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm ready to break. The ships, both human and Veleth, were positioned in defensive formations, ready to fight. The soldiers, engineers, and crew members waited with bated breath. "Status report," Karen called out, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Everything's set," the officer replied. "All ships are in position. Weapons are primed. We're ready." Nera, standing beside Karen, looked grim. Her species had suffered so much already. Now, they were about to face their greatest challenge, an enemy that had wiped out their people and left them broken. The Veleth had not fought a battle of this scale in years, but now they had no choice. "They're coming closer," Naira said, her voice calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. "The Tzora will not hesitate. They'll strike first." Karen nodded. "We need to be ready for their attack. Hold steady." A loud alarm suddenly blared through the command center, signaling that Zora had fired the first shot. The display showed a massive energy blast speeding toward one of the Veleth's defensive satellites. The satellite tried to dodge, but it was too slow. With a deafening boom, it was destroyed in a burst of light. "Return fire," Karen shouted. "All ships, open fire." Immediately, the Earth and Veleth ships unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy beams. The sky above the planet erupted in flashes of light as explosions rocked the Zora fleet. The enemy ships were big, but they were slow and unwieldy compared to the smaller, faster human and Veleth vessels. "Direct hit," a crew member shouted, pointing at the screen. A Zora ship had been struck by a missile and exploded in a fiery ball. It was a small victory, but it was enough to fuel their hope. But the Zora were relentless. They returned fire with devastating power. Karen's heart pounded as she watched the energy blast streak toward their fleet, striking ships and causing massive damage. One of the Veleth ships was hit, its shields flickering before the hull buckled under the force of the impact. "Damage report," Karen barked. "Shields are down on the left side," another officer replied. "The ship is still functional, but we're losing power in some areas." Karen clenched her fists. She knew that the first wave of attacks would be just the beginning. The Zora were strong, but they had to be smarter than that. Earth's forces were not as big, but they had tactics, speed, and resilience. "Prepare for the next phase of the attack," Karen said, her voice unwavering. "We need to move in closer and hit them where it hurts. Get the Veleth ships to flank their left side. We'll hit them from the front." The battle raged on, ships dodging blasts and retaliating with everything they had. It was chaos, but there was a strange sense of unity in the air. Humans and Veleth, once strangers to one another, fought side by side, their combined strength stronger than any enemy. "Enemy ship approaching fast," one of the officers called out, but before anyone could react, a Veleth ship moved in and intercepted it, firing a powerful beam that disabled the Zora vessel. "We're holding them off," Naira called, her eyes bright with determination. "The Zora are not invincible." Karen smiled, the first real smile since the battle began. "We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for the future." But the battle was far from over. The Zora fleet was vast, and every second of this fight was a test of endurance. Earth's forces and the Veleth would have to give everything they had if they wanted to win. The battle had raged for hours, and the Zora fleet was still massive, their ships pushing forward relentlessly. The sky above the Veleth homeworld was filled with flashes of energy, as missiles and beams collided in a dazzling show of destruction. It was clear now that this was not just a fight for the Veleth's survival, it was a fight for their future. Karen Mendez stood at the command center, her face tense as she watched the battle unfold on the large screen. The damage to their forces was mounting. Several Earth and Veleth ships had been heavily damaged, and the Zora's superior firepower was taking its toll. But Karen refused to give up. "We need to do more," she said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion creeping into her bones. "We can't just keep dodging and returning fire. We need to hit them where it hurts." Naira, standing next to her, nodded. The Veleth leader was no stranger to battle, but even she could see the odds stacked against them. "They will not stop," Naira said, her eyes scanning the tactical map. "They think they can wipe us out in one final strike." Karen looked at the display. The Zora had pulled some of their ships into a tight formation, likely preparing for a devastating blow. It was a tactic that would wipe out everything in their path. But the human strategist in Karen saw an opportunity. "They're making a mistake," she said, pointing to the screen. "They're concentrating all their firepower in one place. If we can strike their flanks and split them up, we can destroy their advantage." Naira raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. It's our only chance." Without hesitation, Karen gave the order. The Veleth and Earth ships were repositioned. Smaller, faster ships darted to the Zora's left and right, distracting the enemy and drawing them into separate zones of attack. The larger Vleth ships, which had been taking most of the enemy's hits, began to retreat, giving the Zora the illusion of a winning edge. As the Zora fleet pressed forward, Karen's heart pounded. This was their moment. Now, she shouted. The Earth and Vleth ships, hidden in the shadows of the larger Vleth vessels, suddenly emerged from both sides of the Zora fleet. They hit the Zora from multiple directions, catching them off guard. Missiles exploded against the sides of the enemy ships, tearing through their shields and leaving them vulnerable. The Zora fleet scrambled to retaliate, but it was too late. One of their massive ships took a direct hit to the engines, and within moments, it erupted in a brilliant explosion. The shockwave sent debris flying, hitting other Zora ships and causing a chain reaction. Direct hit, one of the officers shouted, his voice full of excitement. One of their flagship ships is down. Karen couldn't help but smile, a surge of hope filling her chest. They had done it. The Zora were in disarray, their carefully planned assault falling apart. But there was no time to celebrate. The Zora, though shaken, were not finished yet. Their remaining ships began regrouping, trying to push back against the Earth-Vleth forces. The battle was still far from over, but the tide had turned. The Vleth were no longer on the defensive. They had struck back, and the Zora felt the weight of their anger and resistance. Karen turned to Nira. We've got them on the ropes. Now we finish this. Nira's eyes burned with determination. We will make them regret underestimating us. The Earth and Vleth forces pushed forward, their attacks relentless. With every blast, they chipped away at the Zora fleet. The Zora had underestimated the power of an alliance between Earth and the Vleth, and now they were paying the price. The battle wasn't over yet, but Karen knew they had a chance. Against all odds, they had turned the tide. They had shown the Zora that Earth would not back down, that the Vleth would not be wiped from the galaxy. And with every blast, Earth and the Vleth fought not just for survival, but for something more. Hope. The battle had been fierce, and the air was thick with the smoke of burning ships. The Zora, once so confident in their superiority, were now retreating. Their fleet had been shattered, and Earth and the Vleth stood victorious. It had not been an easy victory, and many lives had been lost on both sides. But they had won. The Zora were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. The alliance between Earth and the Vleth had proven stronger than anyone could have imagined. Karen Mendez stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. The Zora ships, what remained of them, were retreating into deep space. Earth's forces had dealt a decisive blow, crippling the Zora fleet and forcing them to fall back. It's over, one of the officers said, his voice filled with disbelief. We did it. We actually did it. Karen felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. It was finally over, but the cost had been high. The Vleth had lost so many of their ships, and Earth had taken heavy casualties as well. But they had stopped the Zora. They had fought back the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever seen. Nara, standing beside her, looked out the window at the burning wreckage of Zora ships. The Vleth leader's face was a mixture of relief and sorrow. We have won, she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. But at what cost? Karen understood the pain in Nira's voice. The Vleth had lost so much, and many of their people had fallen in the fight. But this battle was not just for survival, it was for the future. The Zora had wanted to erase them from the galaxy, to make them a forgotten people. But Earth had given them a chance to fight back, to reclaim their place in the stars. We did it together, Karen said, her voice steady. Earth and the Vleth. This victory is for both of us. Nira nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and respect. You were right, human. We could not have done it without you. We would have died without your help. Karen smiled, though it was a tired smile. We couldn't stand by and watch. We've always fought for those who can't fight for themselves. The command center was alive with activity as Earth's fleet began to regroup and assess the damage. The Veleth, though battered, were already planning their next steps. They would rebuild, but it would take time. They had a long road ahead of them. Outside the command center, the sky was clear once more. The dark clouds of war had lifted, and the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. Earth and the Veleth had fought together, and in doing so, they had forged a bond that would last forever. Karen looked at Naira, her expression serious. This isn't the end. The Tzora will regroup. We'll need to stay strong. Together, we can defend against them, but we have to stay united. Naira met her gaze with unwavering determination. We will. The Tzora will never take our world again. As the Earth and Veleth forces began to recover from the battle, a new chapter began. It was a chapter of hope, of unity, and of strength. The galaxy had learned something important. Earth and the Veleth had stood together against the greatest threat they had ever known. And together, they had emerged victorious. The battlefield was quiet now. The sounds of war had faded, replaced by a peaceful silence that seemed almost unnatural after the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. Earth's ships hovered above the Veleth homeworld, now calm and secure. The Tzora, broken and defeated, had retreated into the depths of space. For the first time in years, the Veleth were free. Karen Mendez stood on the observation deck of the horizon, staring out at the stars. The destruction of the Tzora fleet was a victory, but it had come at a high price. Both Earth and the Veleth had lost too much, but the cost was worth it. The Tzora had been stopped. The galaxy had seen that the Veleth were not as easily erased as the Tzora had hoped. Naira walked up beside Karen, her face a mixture of sadness and pride. The Veleth leader had changed since their first meeting. No longer was she a broken, distrustful figure. She was a leader, a symbol of the Veleth's strength and resilience. We have won, but the scars will remain, Naira said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her people's loss. Our world is in ruins, and many of our people are gone. Karen nodded. I know, but this battle was about more than just surviving. It was about showing the galaxy that the Veleth are not just victims. You fought back. You showed the Tzora that they can't erase you. You have a future. Naira's eyes softened, and we will rebuild, with Earth by our side. Karen smiled. We've come a long way, haven't we? From strangers to allies, fighting together for a better future. The Veleth, though weary and scarred, were already beginning the process of rebuilding. Earth's forces had offered their assistance, bringing supplies and technology to help restore what had been lost. The two species worked side by side, not just as allies, but as partners. On the surface, Veleth cities that had once been destroyed were now being reconstructed. The technology Earth had provided was helping the Veleth rebuild faster than they had hoped. In return, the Veleth shared their ancient knowledge, offering new insights into space travel and energy production that could benefit Earth. The alliance between Earth and the Veleth was not just a military partnership, it was the beginning of a new era. Together, they formed a new galactic coalition, one built on trust, unity, and shared goals. They would protect the galaxy from future threats, and they would ensure that no race was left behind or forgotten again. As Karen stood with Naira, watching the Veleth planet begin to heal, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Earth had not just fought for its own survival, it had fought for the survival of an entire species, and in doing so, it had changed the galaxy forever. We've shown the galaxy what Earth can do, Karen said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. We've proven that humanity is willing to fight for what's right. No one will forget this. Naira looked out at the horizon, where the stars seemed brighter than before. And we will never forget what you've done for us. The Veleth are forever in your debt, Karen Mendez, and in the debt of all humans. Karen smiled and nodded. It wasn't about debt. It was about standing up for each other. That's what allies do. As the sun began to rise over the Veleth world, Karen felt a renewed sense of purpose. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth had found its place in the galaxy. It was no longer just a small planet on the edge of space. It was a powerful force, a protector of the weak, and a symbol of hope. The galaxy had been changed that day, not just by the victory over the Zora, but by the bond that had been forged between Earth and the Vileth. Together, they would face whatever the future held, stronger than ever before.